Hey, what's up guys, my name's Sam. I'm a photographer and filmmaker based here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and today I want to give my first impressions on that camera. That's the Canon C70. And at this point I would have had this camera for around 2 weeks and maybe a little bit more because I had loaned the camera for a bit from Canon Malaysia prior to getting this one on my own. And yeah, I wanted to give my first impressions. This isn't a review because I don't think I have shot with the camera enough. I have taken this camera on a couple of corporate jobs so far. However, these jobs weren't really dynamic range intensive. So it wasn't really pushing the camera to its limits, more of like the usability of it. I did want to do a couple of personal projects which really had to, just really test out the dynamic range, pushing the image, giving me a little bit more creative freedom with it. However, thanks to the total lockdown here in Malaysia right now, that's not possible. But as soon as I'm able to, I'll probably do an update video or probably update this on Instagram. So anyway, let's not waste any more time. Let's just jump straight into the first impressions of the Canon C70. Starting off with the image quality. Now, as I said again, I couldn't really test out the dynamic range in this camera. However, the one thing that I do like about this is really the log format. The C-Log 3 on its own really does give this very... I don't really want to use the word cinematic because I don't think that's the correct term, but it does give this very pleasing organic look coming out, a video coming out on the C-Log 3 log format. Especially the skin tones, it does look a little bit nicer to look, especially when you just slap on the Canon provided LUT straight on. I do think that this camera does produce really beautiful looking images. However, one thing I do want to say is that comparatively to the camera that I normally use, which is the Canon 1DX Mark III, I can't really see any real quality difference, if I may. I think once again, this is the main reason why, because I have not been able to put this camera into like a intense situation where I really needed to push the image, and so that's why I can't really see the differences, even and I don't really grade my images to a point where it's like overly graded or a lot of heavy grading, so I can't really see an image quality difference. Even the fact, comparatively, the 1DX is full frame and that is a Super 35 or a crop sensor. I don't really see a difference in depth of field. Maybe slightly, but to me it's a little bit marginal, and I'll talk a little bit about the adapter that I have on this, which is the 0.71 times adapter. But in terms of image quality, I can't really see any difference. However, this camera doesn't have any moire at all, and unfortunately, something that people don't talk about is the Canon 1DX Mark III has moire, which is a huge disappointment because I thought we were over that a long time ago. Also, another thing, the Rec 709 profile on this, I'm not so sure if I shot it wrongly, but I find that it clips a lot faster than on my 1DX Mark III, but that could also be due to the screen. In this shot right here, I find it's not a super challenging situation. However, the white shirt definitely clipped out a lot faster than I expected. I probably will never shoot in the Rec 709 look anymore. Mainly because I think it's so easy to grade C-Log 3, and I'd rather just shoot C-Log 3 on its own, or maybe the HLG, but I'll have to do a lot more tests to find out more. So the next thing about this camera is the ND filters, and this is one of the biggest reasons why I chose this camera. If you're interested in seeing why I chose this camera, I have a video up here that I did 2 weeks ago when I unboxed this camera. I think the ND filters on these are some of the cleanest that I've ever used. Hardly gives any tint. However, if you use like the ND 8 and 10, the extended range, I do find it gives it a little bit more green tint, sorry. And I think that's because they're using two NDs at the same time, so that's bound to happen. However, I have used multiple different NDs: the moment variable filter, the Peter McKinnon filter, the Tiffin filter, some random filters here and there. And whilst some of them are better than others, they always give, number one, a color cast, and number two, it always lifts the contrast a little bit, so you have this slightly washed out look, which I personally don't like. But I just have to live with it because that's the problem with using external ND filters. And this ND filter, built-in ND filters, are such a godsend. And if you're coming from like the 1DX Mark III or a mirrorless camera, it really does make a difference. You don't have to worry about unscrewing filters here and there. You can just change your lens and you're really just good to go, and that's what I really like. Now the biggest issue with me really is the ergonomics of this camera, which is something that I want to talk about. I can't remember where I read this or where I heard. Somebody said that the Canon C70 is like a cinema camera that's trying to be a mirrorless camera, and I couldn't agree more with this statement, because if you look at the shape and the form factor of the C70, it looks more like a stills camera than it does a video camera. This whole unibody design is both a pro and a con. Yes, I appreciate the size, and really I was able to carry this, a 24-105, and this 50mm into one 10-liter sling bag from Peak Design. And it's crazy to think that you can have a cinema camera in such a tiny package. However, there are some downsides with a tiny package like this. The first of which is that because of the way it's designed, that's similar to like a DSLR mirrorless, you have micro jitters. Unfortunately, that's because of the way the camera is. It's light. Well, it's a little bit slightly heavier than the 1DX Mark III, but it's still light, and unfortunately, because you know the grip is connected straight to the body, any sort of vibrations will be translated into your footage. The one thing that I really loved about like the C200 that I use extensively but never really owned, and like the C300 and stuff like that, is that that grip was always detached a lot away from the body. So when you were holding it, you know, you weren't really introducing any form of jitter, or you could reduce it as much as possible because of the way the camera is. And also another thing in terms of ergonomics and micro jitters is that the back of the screen, whilst it's nice that it swivels out, it's honestly, in my opinion, a terrible decision to have it at the back of the camera. The reason why is that because one of the fantastic things about, let's say, going back to the C200, you had the screen that was up here, and what that meant is that you could actually position your camera right at your body, and you could see the screen right here, giving you a much more stable point of contact. You're forcing the body against your body, and you're able to just really control how you're shooting. Unfortunately, when the screen is at the back of the camera, you're kind of pushing it down like this, and your head goes down like this. You strain your neck, you strain your back, you strain your shoulders, and you just can't control it as comfortably as you could if your screen was on top here. And that's why I totally agree when it says that this is a cinema camera trying to be a mirrorless camera, because everything about the design of the camera really harkens back to like a mirrorless camera. It's like I'm shooting with a mirrorless camera, just that it has extended functions. And I think the question I also want to ask is that what really makes a cinema camera? Is it the way you shoot with it, the ergonomics and things like that? Because I think that this C70, while fantastic, does produce really lovely images with that DGO sensor, it needs to be rigged out. However, there are a few things that I want to talk about that. And but I think if you really want to shoot handheld with this camera, you can shoot with it out of the box. However, you do need to rig it up if you want to properly do a professional looking handheld shots. Because as it stands, this camera, it's just too much of a DSLR mirrorless form factor to really have that nice camera handheld look, which is not, I wouldn't say I'm disappointed, because I knew this buying this camera. I just didn't expect that I would really need to rig it out, because going on from that, it's really the top handle. I do like the top handle. It's not as bad as a lot of people are saying. However, there's a lot of room for improvement. The one compared to like the C200, C300, this feels like, well, it is plastic, but it feels pretty cheap. But the one thing that's really fantastic, it's really this knob here. On the C200, C300, you needed tools to actually unscrew it, but this one you can just screw it here on its own. Really fantastic. Well, it does get the job done. However, when I can, I will probably switch out the top handle. Another thing I want to talk about is this cold shoe right here. This cold shoe right here, I think it's in the wrong spot. I think it should be a little bit back, or the microphone holder should be a little bit extended out. The reason why is that this this cold shoe, whilst it's nice to have one, is like I can't really put anything here because the microphone holder is blocking me. The shock mount is blocking me. If I put a monitor, it'll be blocked. So I'll need to extend it out either with a magic arm or something like that. So there's not much room to put a lot of stuff here, mainly because of this microphone holder. I've seen somebody put it the other way around, but I tried it. However, the cable would interrupt if you put it here. So if you flip it the other way, the cable will interrupt here, which is a no-no. So this top handle, while fantastic, design choice I think could be improved a little bit more. The HDMI port, in my opinion, is too close to the bottom of the camera, and so what happens is sometimes you might actually lean your camera when you put it down onto the HDMI cable itself, depending on how top heavy this camera is, and that's really a no-no, because that could potentially ruin the port. Something else that I don't really like is that there is only one record button here. I would have liked to see another record button either up in front here or down here. Yes, I know that you can remap the waveform, the function 4 button to a record button. However, I don't like that. The reason why is because I'm taking away another custom function button for me to use. And the one thing that the Canon cinema cameras was so good at was that it really helped you shoot in a run and gun situation, because all the buttons, there's so many physical buttons to customize to however you wanted. And if I were to customize this to a record function, I'm taking away another button for me to use, which I personally don't like, because all these custom function buttons I have mapped it out to the way that I like it to make my shooting as efficient and as fast as possible. If you're interested to see how I map out all the buttons, I'll be more than happy to do that. However, I do wish that there was another record button somewhere instead of just remapping the function 4 button. Speaking of the buttons, I do really like that everything is completely customizable. Like if I wanted like number 1 to be something else, it's the same. Every single button can be remapped to the exact same thing as everything else. And this is what I mean when I was talking in my previous video about why people would choose a cinema camera over like a DSLR mirrorless. I think it's really customizability is one of the major factors. If you look at like a 1DX Mark III or an R5, yes, you can customize most of the buttons. However, most of the buttons don't let you customize it to whatever you want. Certain buttons only allow you to customize to a certain range of items, not everything. One button might offer more functions to change to, and some might not even offer you what you want, and so that's the limitations that you have when you're shooting with like a hybrid camera. If you want true control, a cinema camera or a video camera is the way to go. And I really love that, coming from like a DSLR mirrorless kind to just being able to customize every single thing that I could possibly want. Is fantastic. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the autofocus. Now, the autofocus on this is acceptable. I think it's great that like a cinema camera like this does have autofocus. However, in terms of usability, the 1DX Mark III, the R5, or even the R has much better AF functions, or it's much easier to control the AF on the 1DX on these mirrorless cameras or these like hybrid cameras versus on this. The one thing that I have found is that it's a little bit cumbersome in terms of autofocus, and sometimes it's not as accurate when the subject is when the location is a little bit dim, or the subject is more towards the side. The face tag doesn't really pick up the face, and I do wish that there's eye detect on this, because I mean it does use DPAF, but maybe the processing is a little bit different. So yeah, was slightly disappointed with the AF on this. But one thing I do want to say, I think it's the face priority or face only, I can't remember per se, but when essentially what it is the camera will lock onto a face, and if the face disappears, the focus will stay on where the face was last seen. And I do like that, because as I said again, the usability on AF is much easier on like these hybrid cameras. And just having that, being able to like the camera to automatically just lock onto the focus plane when a face disappears, just makes it a little bit easier when you're shooting with a relatively difficult system to control the AF on this camera. It's not bad. I think it's it's still much better than a lot of other cinema cameras out there. It's just a bit, I mean, obviously because this one has AF, I just wish that the usability and the functions would be similar to what we have on these hybrid cameras. So the one thing I do want to talk about is that RF mount. I think Canon did a really smart decision to push into the RF mount, and which also I think the mount allowed it to be this small. One thing that I do like is that the new 0.71 times adapter, or basically a focal reducer, a speed booster that Canon produced, it's now changing the field of view of a Super 35 to closer to that of a full frame, and it gives you an extra stop of light. I think this is a huge benefit, and one of the reasons why I chose this over like the C300 Mark III is that just being able to have that extra field of view is actually very helpful. I shoot a lot of run and gun work, so sometimes you just don't have the space or the time to move back, and just having that extra field of view of a full frame camera, a full frame sensor, is very helpful. However, the downsides of using that adapter is, number one, it's pretty pricey. And it currently only supports, I think, 3 lenses. And when I say supports, I mean fully supports dual pixel autofocus on these lenses. I can't actually remember what those lenses are. I'll put them down somewhere here. But if let's say you put any other lens like this 50mm 1.2 on it, autofocus will still work. However, you won't get the full range or the flexibility of dual pixel AF, and it will hunt a lot more. And considering that this camera AF does hunt a lot more compared to these cameras, that's kind of a bummer. However, Canon is producing a firmware update at the end of this month to expand the range, and hopefully they expand the range to a lot more lenses. But I do like this focal reducer. It does help a lot, and I think it's a fantastic option. And speaking of adapting lenses, I have, with the normal adapter, just the RF to EF or EF to RF, I haven't found any issues with that adapter whatsoever. I think it's working fantastic, and that's one of the benefits of using, like, you know, Canon glass with Canon cameras with the Canon adapter. Everything's really seamless. I haven't used any third-party lenses with it because I don't own any third-party lenses. But I haven't found autofocus issues, aperture issues, or whatever issues, and IS and things like that. So really happy with it. Also, another thing I want to talk about is the IS. The IS works, the digital IS works the same like the 1DX Mark III, very similar. You do have to turn on the image stabilization on your lens if you have it on that lens to engage the IS. The image stabilization is hit and miss. It's great in certain situations. I find that if you are steady, it does help to reduce a lot of shake. However, if you're moving a lot, or if you're on a gimbal, that I find some wobbliness, that weird jitter. So I would not suggest using the digital IS unless you really need, or unless you are really being cautious of how you shoot. A couple of small nitpicks is I don't really like the mini XLRs on this. It's not that they're bad. I mean, I haven't even tested them out because I can't get any mini XLR cables anywhere yet. And which goes to show, if you need stuff in a pinch, it's a bit hard to get replacement cables for like a mini XLR. I do like the tally light. The tally light is something that I didn't know that I needed, but it really does help when you're shooting with the talent. Like, you know, they know that you're shooting them right now, so that they are always camera ready. Things like that. The fan also on this is quite quiet. Yes, you can change, like, to turn it on, high, low, whatever you want. But I haven't found it to like ruin any of the recordings that I've done so far, so that's pretty fantastic. So I just want to end this by saying, like, who this camera is for. After using it for a while, I find that I think this camera shines in specific situations. Yes, you can shoot this camera like anywhere you want. You can still get great images. However, I think if you want to really push and make the most out of this camera, this is really more of a studio-esque camera. Something that, you know, you do a lot of corporate sit-downs, not too much movement, not too much handheld work. I think if you are doing mostly on sticks, this is the perfect camera, mainly because like the screen is at the back here, so you don't really have to worry about like that ergonomics of handheld. Just the form factor of it just makes it much more ideal to shoot on a tripod versus handheld. It's very similar to like the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, Pocket 4K, and things like that. The ergonomics of the Blackmagic was very weird, and so you really needed to rig it out. However, if you're shooting on sticks, it makes a lot of sense because like all you do is like just touch controls and things like that. Similar with the C70, you know, it's built for, I think, that studio live stream. Well, it's always living on a tripod most of the time. I think that's where it will shine the most. However, that's not saying that you can't shoot this anywhere else. I've shot it on like handheld corporate jobs. I plan to shoot it on some weddings, and so I'll probably give my opinion about that later on. However, yeah, you know what? This camera is, once again, going back to that initial statement, it is a cinema camera trying to be a mirrorless camera. The size and form factor, it's just opening up a new, in my opinion, a bridge for people to transition from these hybrid cameras into a fully fledged video camera. Is that wrong? I don't think so, because that's where that market lies, you know, like the way we create content, the way we shoot for brands and companies now has completely changed. Things are very different, you know, and you're now required to be on a very, very small crew, smaller budgets and things like that. So having like something, this price point, it's still an expensive camera, don't get me wrong, but comparatively to a lot of other cinema cameras, it's actually pretty affordable. And that's where I think this lies, you know, it's that transitionary period from you moving from a hybrid camera to a fully fledged out video camera, something that's small size, can keep your crew size down, because with a camera like this, you don't need a big crew to operate. Like when I'm shooting on a bigger set with like, let's say a Red or a Blackmagic, you know, you need at least another person to kind of like help you shoot. The reason why is because the way it's built, it's like sort of like works better when you have multiple people working on that camera at the same time. And this is where like the C70 or the C series really shines. It's like you are able to shoot on your own. You're able to shoot with a tiny crew. You're able to shoot with you as the gaffer, the DP, the director, and things like that. So if you're like that sort of one-man band, the C70 is absolutely perfect. Gives you amazing images at a form factor that is very, very manageable. Is this a perfect camera? No, I think it's far from being a perfect camera. There are a lot of things that I would improve about it, but at the same time, it's not really the fault of the camera. It's the way it's built to fit a specific need, and that's why I still think, even though it's not the perfect camera, it's a good choice for me, because everything that I need it for, it does well. There are a couple of quirks, obviously, that I don't really like. However, it is still a great camera, and I'm very happy that I chose this. So is this the right camera for you? Probably not. It depends, once again, on the situation. There is no best camera. You know, even I think Reds are not the best camera for every single situation. It's going to be ideal for bigger crews, yes, but if you shoot at a wedding, small crew, maybe not. So in that situation, it's about understanding what you shoot the most and how you're going to choose a camera that fits what you do. There's not going to be a best camera. It's about finding the one that suits you. And for me, the C70, well, it suits me a lot. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot. I would really love to know what you think about the C70. If you've owned it, if you're looking to get one, if you're just passing through, really love to know your opinion. So if you have any questions about it that you'd like me to cover in a future video, I'll be more than happy to. Yeah, don't forget to stay safe, guys. As soon as we can get this pandemic crap over, we can all go out and continue shooting and, you know, just making the most of what we have. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching again, and I will see you in the next one.